Questions 11, 12, and 13 on the Module 4 readiness assurance process stumped a lot of teams and I presume a lot of individuals. And these are very important concepts of the concepts of consumer surplus, producer surplus, deadweight loss, total surplus. They're very important for assessing, what's the value of having this market functioning in the economy, or in this case, this particular product in the economy. How does that value compare to the highest possible value we could imagine? And so let's proceed through this one. We're given this outcome. Notice that the firm is maximizing profits. It's on the highest ISA profit line that can be attained given the constraint of the consumer's willingness to pay. It's all consumers together willingness to pay. So consumer surplus is the area below the demand curve and above the price paid. All consumers are paying a single price in this example. And we can think of the first person that was willing to buy a ping pong paddle was willing to pay $25, but they got it for $15, so they got $10 worth of surplus for that first paddle. And when we count the difference between the amount that somebody was willing to pay less what they had to pay, we get their surplus too. If we count up over all the surpluses for every paddle sold, we're left with the area below the demand curve and above the price line. That's consumer surplus. Producer surplus, the minimum necessary to supply the good, producers would have to cover their marginal costs. As long as they could cover their marginal costs, they'd be as well off or better producing the good as not. So for the first paddle, the producer was willing to offer it to market for $1, but instead they got 15. So for that first paddle, they got a lot of surplus. And if we counted up the surplus for producers, it would be the area below the price line, above the marginal cost, counted up over all the paddles sold. Now, you should be able to see that the biggest that total surplus could ever get would be if we produced where marginal cost and price were just equal, market price. That's the intersection of the marginal cost function and the demand curve. Notice that at 40, there's still buyers willing to pay more than it would cost to provide. So surplus would have kept growing all the way to this point. After this point where 60,000 were sold, the costs of one more paddle are bigger than the benefits of one more paddle. The surplus gets smaller. So this is the maximum surplus point, and the maximum total surplus would be this whole area, the biggest consumer surplus possible, biggest producer surplus, the biggest total surplus possible. Anyway, so when we look at the sum of consumer surplus plus producer surplus for this outcome, we see that we fell short of the maximum possible surplus by this triangle. We call that the deadweight loss. All right, so now it's just a matter of calculation. Hopefully you remember your, I don't know when you learned area of triangle, pretty early on, 5th or 6th grade probably, but it's been a long time. All right, so consumer surplus is this area below the demand curve, above the price line. We've got a vertical distance of 10, right? The y-intercept is 25 for the demand curve. The price paid is 15. We've got a horizontal distance of 40,000. So consumer surplus is the area of that triangle, 1/2 times the base, which is 40,000, times the height, which is 10. So we're left with 1/2 times 40,000 is 20,000 times 10. That's 200,000. That's the numerical amount. Notice that the units, price is in dollars per unit, quantity is in 1,000 units per month. We're left with dollars per month as the units, which is pretty handy to have a welfare measure, a well-being measure that's denominated in dollars, because that's that unit enables us to compare values across a lot of different areas in the economy. All right, so B is the answer for number 1. Producer surplus, slightly harder. Let's change our pen color. Producer surplus, remember, is the area below the price line and above the marginal cost curve. it's not that hard to calculate the area of I think that's a rhombus, but I find it easier just to break that up into a rectangle and a triangle. Anyway, the producer surplus is equal to the area of that rectangle. That rectangle has a height of 8 and a base of 40,000. And the triangle has a height of 6, 1/2 times 40,000 times 6. So there we are. And when we add those two things up, 8 times 40,000, that's 320,000, plus 3 times 40,000, 1/2 times 6 is 3, times 40,000 is 120,000, and that's $40,000 per month. That makes D the right answer for number 2, and then, for number 12. And then finally, the deadweight loss, we're looking at this triangle. It's got, again, a height of, or actually we could turn on its side, that would be the base, doesn't really matter. And then if that's the base, 6 is the base, we've got a height of 20,000. And so we make sure that actually the height is 8, not 6. I'm looking at my notes, but not seeing them correctly. All right, so deadweight loss is this area here, the surplus we didn't get relative to the best possible surplus, 1/2 times 8 times 20,000. That's 10,000 times 8, that's 80,000, again, dollars per month. So that makes C the right answer for number 13. Practice these. These problems are really easy to make new practice problems. This is a concept that, though very important, is fairly easy too once you get the idea what's going on. Let's do that deadweight loss in red and back to blue for consumer surplus. So practice, practice, practice. That's how we get better at things. That's how we learn things.